Hello everyone. Like yourselves, we're currently holed up due to the coronavirus lockdown, and as a result the Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, is a lot quieter than what it normally is. But we've got plenty to tinker around with and things to do, so should keep us going for a while. The one thing I'd like to share with you is an example, or a few examples, of the lights I have in my collection. Now, excuse the mess, it's a work in progress, and this of course is a far from final setup. So first up, got these little festoon lights. Now these are 24 volt bulbs, but I've got them running at 12 instead, so they go a bit dimmer and last much longer. And of course this light here is a LED light, a 44 watt light that lights up the workbench. It's very good, got it off a mate a few years ago. A daylight LED filament reflector bulb retrofitted into an iWatchman outdoor fitting. It's like the fact that it conceals the light source but lights up underneath, which is really cool. This here is a double fluoro 4-foot light fitting made right here in New Zealand by Thorn. Sadly it's no more, but instead of a couple of glass tubes we've got some LED ones which use just a little bit less than half of the original tubes. Okay, moving on to high intensity discharge lighting. This light here is an 80 watt mercury light and it runs off a ballast. This here is a diodemic street light fitting with a 70 watt high pressure sodium inside it. Now this here is a self-ballasted mercury light. Now this does not need a ballast. It plugs straight into the mains, and as you can see it's got a Homer Simpson haircut style filament inside it, and that basically limits the current for the mercury tube down the middle. Puts out quite a nice light. It's made by Toshiba and it's 250 watts. This light here, a GL500 New Zealand made street light, very common throughout the 80s and 90s, and still a few of them around, but they're being replaced by LED lights. This here is an Australian made Sylvania B2222 light fitting. Now this one I've put an 18 watt low pressure sodium in it, and it puts out a nice lovely amber glow. Got some Christmas lights here. Now once again these are running off half the voltage to make them last much longer. This here is a modified Parcam, but it's got a couple of GU10 halogens in it. Looks like a couple of eyes looking at you. Pretty neat. Now here I've got just a couple of examples out of the entertainment lighting industry. Here's a New Zealand made theatre light control disc that can be used to control such lights. This is only a very basic lighting disc, and it uses a protocol called DMX, which when matched up with appropriate fixtures that can be controlled with DMX, you can control using these sliders here and buttons, which is pretty cool. So just here we've got a couple of Parcans. These are both Par 56s, and this one's got the headlight style lens on it. They're actually the same body and shape as headlights in many cars, believe it or not, but these are 230 volt, but once again running them at much lower voltage. This one's got a gel frame in it, so you can put like a coloured gel in there to make it go whichever colour you like. This here is a LED can. This is what's called an RGBW can. Now that can be controlled by DMX, but I've currently got it set to a fade pattern. So when I say RGBW, that means red, green, blue and white, and right now all of them are on. So basically using a combination of these colours, you can make pretty much any colour you like. But this one's going through a gentle fade pattern, which looks really choice. They also come in strips, and these are called washers, wall washers, so they're often installed on buildings and often light up sides of buildings, and they go different colours and all that sort of thing. One such example is the Sky Tower in Auckland CBD, so they can basically program it to go any colour they like to coincide with various events that go on around the world, which is pretty choice. Here we have a halogen incandescent retrofit lamp. There's another one just over by the street lights as well. Another LED reflector in a Watchman fitting. Now this here is another self-ballasted mercury. It goes straight into a normal light socket. Now these used to be quite common in the, I'd say the 80s mostly, and probably the 90s as well, and the 70s and all that. Now basically these are designed to be installed in places where lamp changing is not that easy or common to do, so they last a lot longer. The catch is when you turn them off, you've got to wait for about 5 minutes before they'll restrike, so in a brief power cut they can be a bit of a pain if you've got a lot of them, so you've got to wait for a while. And just above that we've got some incandescent industrial lamps. So this one's a 200, that one's a 300 watt, and they were once common in buildings, warehouses and all that, before being replaced by the aforementioned mercury vapour. This here's a semi-resonant start double 4-foot fluorescent light fitting. Got a couple of New Zealand made tubes in there, only one of them's running at present, the other one I need to hook up and get going again, but just one tube is enough for now, and a double 3-foot that's not currently plugged in. This bright bugger is a 400 watt metal halide high bay light. Now these are quite common in warehouses and stuff. Now, they put out a lot more light than the mercury vapour and the incandescents. Very efficient, but once again if you turn them off you've got to wait for them to cool down before they'll kick in again. These are rapidly being replaced with LED technology in new installations, and like LEDs and fluorescents they come in a few different colour temperatures as well, like cool white, daylight and warm white. Now this is an old style New Zealand made 5-foot fluorescent light. Now it's got a more modern slimline T8 tube in it, and it also once had the old style fluorescent light ballast that also had the PCB containing power factor correction capacitor in it, which started to leak. So of course that's not very healthy, so I removed that and put a more modern up-to-date ballast in there as well, so it's environmentally friendly. Now back to some street lights. Now got a double 2-foot here. This one's a GEC Astra. It's been in the family for many years, probably well over 40 in fact. Dad scored it from somewhere, I'm not too sure where, but we used to use it a lot around the barrier and all that. We had it hung up in the laundry I think for a while in the house while it was being built. And in my teenage years I stole some bits off it to get other fluorescent light fittings going, so it did sadly sit around for a while in a rather depressed state, and it eventually got rounded up with a bunch of other stuff to be brought back to the mainland to be scrapped, but I rescued it and decided to sit down and restore it, and it's working quite well now. The cover, even though one end's cut, I rescued off a 3-foot version that was broken, so I've given it to this. So what we've got here is a daylight and a warm white tube in there. Now these typically had a single 40 watt ballast in them, and the tubes looped in series, so if one tube went they'd both go out. But what I've done with this, and it actually had the holes ready and waiting from when it was made in the factory to put 2 separate 20 watt ballasts in there, so if one tube goes out, the other one will keep going independently regardless, which is great. This little beaut was once familiar around many streets as well. So these originally had incandescent lamps in them, but they were later upgraded to the aforementioned 160 watt mercury vapor, which went straight in, of course, minimise the need for lamp changing. But what I've done with this one is I've put a classic style LED filament bulb in there, a 7 watt one, so it actually matches up nicely with the optics of this particular light, so it actually looks really cool. So once again, it sort of glows an incandescent style colour, but using a fraction of the power. It's caught up in there, just pull that out, there we go. I've got about 8 of these. They're not very easy to get now, but one day I'll install them all and proudly display them, so I'll do that in the future video. This here is your typical floodlight, which would normally contain a halogen tube. Now they get exceedingly hot, but in this case I've got an LED retrofit, so goes the same colour temperature but doesn't have all that heat, which is nice. Okay, back to the hanging lights. Now this light here is an induction light, which is a straight retrofit like the Mercuries and the Incandescents. Goes straight onto the mains. Now the difference with this is although it uses a phosphor containing tube, which has got the typical gas and mercury and that of the fluorescent tubes, it's got a coil that goes around the tube, a ferrite coil, which is driven by a high frequency inverter, which then excites a charge in the tube and it lights up. Now because there's no actual electrodes in the tube itself, it lasts much longer, and they're an intermediate technology between metal halide and LED. Not that common now. This is a good old fashioned Kiwi made 200 watt rough service lamp, so they last just a little bit longer than the straight normal incandescents, but once again running it at half the voltage to greatly extend the lifespan of the bulb. And yeah, basically the bulb that you'd buy to brighten things up a bit in the living room once upon a time. This is a decorative lamp that the warehouse sell. Looks quite nice, the sort of thing you'd have a few hanging above your dining room bench, and you know, sit down and have a coffee under. They look really neat. You still see a few of them in coffee shops. Hopefully we'll get to go to coffee shops sometime again soon, but not for a few weeks yet. And this beauty here is a 1500 watt incandescent. Now if you do the math with Ohm's law, running it at 110 volts works out to be just a little bit over 300 watts power consumption, but it still puts out plenty of light, and it's enough to light up the bench underneath. And because we've got winter coming, it'll provide a bit of warmth as well, so it actually feels quite nice to be under. And this wee beaut here is a fire glow bulb. Now these are commonly used in electric fireplaces to add some sort of an effect. So they have a rotating aluminium disc that sits above the bulb, which turns from the heat coming off it, and that sort of throws light around in an interesting fashion on fiberglass made embers to make it look like a burning fireplace, where in actual fact it wasn't. The additional heat was provided by a separate bar element. But I bought a bunch of these from the UK to go with some of the other clear coloured bulbs that I've got, so pretty happy with that. Another semi-resonant start double 4-foot fluorescent. Once again only one tube going, but just one tube for now is enough, so perfectly happy with that. Typical LED replacement bulb. You can get them from most supermarkets now. They use a fraction of the power of the old incandescents. Another industrial incandescent, this time a 500 watt one. This is one of 3 that I've got running in the shed, and they throw out a nice light. Sometimes I'll turn just these on, it just adds for a nice effect. Another 18 watt low pressure sodium. Now this particular fixture is out of a tunnel and they couldn't get the bulbs anymore to replace them, so they pulled them all out and I managed to score some. I've got a handful of these kicking around, and one of my favourite lamp types, the low pressure sodium, mostly because of the fact that it puts out a monochromatic light, which is basically, it removes any ability for one to distinguish colours when it's running, when it's the only source of light. It's also invisible to insects as well, so moths and bees and the like, they can't see it, so they're not attracted to it at night. And also they use these extensively in countries where they need to be more mindful about the wildlife, but sadly they're out of production, so yeah, a bit of a working relic. 150 watt tubular high pressure sodium, throws out quite a lot of light. It has a greater colour spectrum as well, so it's sort of like more of a golden white colour. Another 500 watt one. Now this beaut here is quite an old light fitting. It's got a quick start configuration, so what that means is it's got two normal ballasts, like what the double 2-footer you saw before has got, but instead of starters it has a transformer which basically gently heats the filaments of both ends of each tube, and they strike, and that method allows the tubes to last a lot longer. But there's a catch: it will only work with the fat T12 tubes, and sometimes on cold days it won't kick in. It'll just sit there with the ends glowing ever so slightly. You need to run your hand across it, or other times only one tube will kick in and the other one will eventually kick in later on. So come winter time it might need a little bit of encouragement to get going. And once again, it's got the age bands on the tubes, and these tubes are probably about 40 plus years old as well. The far tube is the nice rum and raisin coloured light. Might not be able to see it that well on the camera. Is a deluxe white, and the one closest is like a toothpaste white. That's a 55 daylight. And these are what's called halophosphor tubes, which a lot more stroboscopic than the more modern triphosphor powder that modern tubes use. And of course the third 500 watt one, 500 watt incandescent light running at half voltage. Another reflector security light running at half voltage as well. Okay, now this is still reasonably common in a few households. This is the energy saver bulb. These used to be very expensive. This is the spiral type, and it's a compact fluorescent light which is ran off an electronic ballast which sits in the top there, and it just goes straight into a normal light fitting. They do need to warm up, but they're good as gold once they're completely warmed up. And the last sodium light, another 150 watt high pressure sodium, this time in a elliptical glass envelope with a powder to diffuse the light a bit. And yeah, there you have it. So thank you very much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your time and confinement, and I might do some more videos on other retro and nostalgic technology to keep you amused. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching and have a good afternoon. Thank you.